with accommodating resistance, the one clear statement I want to be able to make is you don't have to have chains and bands to be able to do the conjugate method. You don't. You know, you don't. Well, I mean, this question is a weird question. It's who should and who should not use accommodating resistance for strength training programs. And I'm gonna just take chains out of the equation for this conversation and just stick with bands. That it becomes a tricky situation again, you know, and I don't want to fall back on the standard, it depends, but it really kind of does, because I can sit here and say true beginners should not be using bands when they're doing their training. But what's wrong with them doing, you know, stretches with bands? What's wrong with them doing pull aparts for rear delts? What's wrong? You know, so see, there's that whole aspect where there's band only exercises. And then one of the hardest things that I found when I was working with the general population was to teach people how to stay tight when they squatted and how to stand up with any type of force. So I would work over and over and over to try to teach these things and to be able to get it. And what I finally figured out is if I just put a mini band on the bar, even if it was just a broomstick that we were using, and they unrack the bar, that band, it's not a lot of tension, but the band's enough that's throwing them around just a little bit that they have to flex their torso. They have to get tight. And then when they sit down, they realize they have to stand up with a little bit of force. So I don't want to say that band and accommodation resistance should not be used with beginners, because I know that's 100% false, because that became one of the catalysts to being able to get somebody to squat with really good technique and proficiency that I ever used. And that was for absolute true beginners. Now on the other end of the coin, you can take super advanced pro powerlifters who are using tons of band tension. And then what you can see oftentimes is that's a hell of a lot of accommodating resistance, but the bands also almost become like they're on rails. So they lose the ability to stabilize the bar if the bands are not on there, because the bands are in effect grounding the lifter to a certain degree. But again, these are two outliers on the far ends of the spectrum, because that rarely happens with the pro powerlifter, but it does. And it definitely helped with a beginner, you know, gen pop lifter, but there's probably hundreds of other ways to be able to accomplish the same thing. So you can't say it's good or bad without knowing the full context of the conversation or the training history and so forth. So what I provided, you know, with this Q&A are two extreme examples to where, you know, one, if it is stabilizing them too much, and that was a lifter I was working with, I would build the shit out of the strength with the bands and then possibly deload it down with a 3-week wave of chains and then peak it out for a meet just with straight weight. That would be one of many different options that could be done. And again, they may not even have to do that at all. For most people with accommodating resistance, the one clear statement I want to be able to make is you don't have to have chains and bands to be able to do the conjugate method. You don't. You know, you don't need boards, you don't need chains, you don't need bands. It's a methodology of training that comes down to max effort work and dynamic effort work. Can accommodating resistance help the dynamic effort work? Yes. Should you be able to be proficient at being able to move a weight with speed, you know, before really getting into different cycles with that? I believe so, yes, but you know, that's based upon most of my experience in the past 10 years working with lifters, taking them from intermediate to an elite total. So it's a smaller segment of lifters.